It was an otherwise quiet night on the 27th of May 2022 in Toronto, Canada. That was until 3 AM when a man of the name Saad Mustafa claims that he suddenly heard a hysterical shriek coming from nearby. The story goes that he heard a banging coming up against the wall and the sound of a man yelling, saying, "Why did you push my cat?" His gut instinct told him to investigate, and so he braved it, making his way into the hallway of his apartment where he saw what's been described as a horrific scene. There, he saw his neighbour Arvind Pasha furious and physically threatening a young woman who was pinned up against the wall. But to make matters worse, a glance down at the ground would reveal yet another young lady who appeared to have a stab wound to her neck. It was covered with a long white scarf or shawl, Mustafa said. She was on the floor lying on her back and was bleeding very, very badly. It's said that Mustafa returned to his apartment where he called the police before going back out to ask the suspect to drop his knife. Pasha would allegedly try and make a break for it, but was eventually apprehended by the police. The victims, on the other hand, would both survive the incident as the emergency services made it on time to save them. Mustafa was said to have kept pressure on the neck of the seriously injured victim just long enough for the paramedics to arrive and alleviate the situation. Mustafa said that he was shocked, as he had known Pasha for a total of 6 years, and this didn't seem like the kind of thing that he'd do. But nonetheless, Arvind Pasha, the Airbnb host, would be subject to one charge of aggravated assault involving 2 victims. These 2 victims were guests staying at his Airbnb property. Airbnb themselves would acknowledge the situation, saying that the women would be given a full refund not only for the accommodation, but their flights and other expenses too, as it seems as though they had come on a trip. It goes without saying that Pasha was immediately removed from Airbnb due to this incident, with Airbnb defending themselves by saying that incidents such as these are extremely rare. But with over 1 billion arrivals on Airbnb to date, these sorts of things can happen, though they are taken extremely seriously. Now, one of the really strange things about this case is that you might hear it and think that Pasha is just this deranged lunatic and his place was really off the books and shady and sketchy and whatnot. But it actually wasn't. He had a full business license to operate his apartment in this way. I mean, not the stabbings, but still, he could rent it out on Airbnb. Pasha wouldn't spend any time behind bars because of this, but he was given a total of 9 release conditions, including being ordered to reside with his mother, having to reside within a 10 PM to 6 AM curfew each day, having no further contact with his victims, being unable to possess any weapons, and being unable to consume alcohol or drugs without a medical prescription, just to name a few. Founded in 2008, Airbnb is an online marketplace for short homestays and accommodations. People will list their properties on there and allow complete strangers to stay there for a short period of time. However, by giving the keys of your house to people you don't know, you allow all sorts of awful things to potentially happen there. And on the flip side, by staying in the house of a complete stranger you don't know, you're opening yourself up to a list of potential dangers that might be lurking within it. In this video, we're going to talk about a number of people, homeowners and homestayers alike, that have been banned from Airbnb because of their disgraceful behaviour, just like Arvind Pasha. From a man who's been dubbed the Wolf of Airbnb to a homeowner setting up hidden cameras to spy and stalk on people, Airbnb bannings are rare, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. So we're going to start off a bit lighter, and as we move through the video, each case will get more and more extreme than the last. Pasha's was a spine-chilling story for sure, but it was only our first of 7, with our next tale being of Azaya Shahid. His story can be traced back to New Year's going into 2018. He wanted an absolute mega party. He wanted it to be off the rails, but in the end, he got more than he bargained for. So this incident took place in Seven Hills, Ohio. Yes, okay, I know it's an Ohio case, laugh about it in the comments. But this story actually begins a few days before New Year's, because Azaya Shahid decided to rent out an Airbnb from a man of the name Samyang Lee for a 2-night stay, which set him back about $40. Shahid, though, had come up with a plan to not only make his money back, but also make a lot more. Because after securing the property, he then took to Twitter to advertise his rager, charging a $5 cover for all attendees. The plan was now put into place, and when the big day of New Year's Eve came, it was put into action. An important piece of information that I think I should provide right now is that based on reports that I've seen, it seems as though Isaiah was only 20 as of the time of hosting this party. So whether or not it went the way that it did, he was still breaking the law nonetheless. For him to be throwing a New Year's Eve party in the USA where there's very likely going to be a gargantuan amount of alcohol, it's illegal by design. On top of that, the people that he's going to invite to this party are likely his friends, they're likely the same age as him, so I would expect a lot of people that are aged between 18 and 22, 23, 24 to be attending this party. Obviously, in the USA, it is illegal to drink alcohol until you're 21 years of age. So I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that even before the party started, there's a bunch of underage drinkers that have already been invited. So that's bad enough, let alone throwing this party in a house that you've rented without telling the owner prior. In the end, it was reported that hundreds of people attended this party, with them being described as packed so tightly that it didn't appear as if there was any space for anyone to move their arms. The police approached the property to the sight of someone shutting the door in their face and locking it, with a large crowd proceeding to shout and yell at the police, swearing at them and spouting out anti-police comments. It was far too much for the Seven Hills force to handle, so they had to contact a further 4 departments, calling in reinforcements from Broadview Heights, Palmer, Brooklyn Heights and Independence. The drunk partygoers would scramble as the police made their way through the house and found the owner of the property, Sam-Young Lee, cowering, locked in his bedroom. Apparently he had been the originator of the noise complaint that had the police sent there in the first place. The partygoers had identified this, and Lee claimed that there was a total of 5 attendees that tried to attack him. But despite being a victim here, Lee was also told off by the authorities because apparently he hadn't notified the city that he was renting out a room in his home. This was a safety violation as his home was never inspected prior to him renting out the room. Shahid would evade capture that fateful night, but would eventually turn himself in on a warrant for several charges, including criminal damaging, disorderly conduct, allowing underage drinking, and more. He was ordered to spend 45 days under house arrest, was given 2 years probation, and was ordered to pay $16,000, split between $15,000 in damages to the homeowner and $1,000 in court fees and fines. To top it all off, it should come as no surprise that upon hearing the news, Airbnb banned Shahid from their platform, never to return. But though you might have thought that the bannings of Pasha and Shahid were fair, many people thought that the same couldn't be said for Bethany Hallam, who was banned because of a minor crime that she had committed a decade prior. So for a video about banned Airbnb users, we really haven't spoken much yet about why people might get banned if not for something horrendous like throwing an absolutely obnoxious New Year's party or trying to stab someone. In practice, Airbnb has a list of guidelines just like any other large social media platform that users, both homeowners and stayers, must adhere to. These differ a lot depending on the type of Airbnb you're renting out, but to try and enforce these rules, Airbnb says on its website that it only does background checks in the USA and India, and that even these checks are infrequent. This background search is nothing more than the name and the date of birth given to them by the user who has booked the accommodation. But back in 2022, these methods would be criticised. This is because Bethany Hallam, a Pennsylvania council person, had booked an Airbnb in Miami for what she described as a dream birthday trip, putting $1,000 down on her accommodation, but after the platform did a background check, they would contact her to inform her that she wouldn't be allowed to use Airbnb because of a criminal records match. So what heinous crime was she said to have committed? Well, as reports go, 9 years prior to this incident, she was charged with misdemeanor possession and a DUI. She would take to social media to protest this ban, saying that 1/3 of Americans have a criminal past and that this was a form of discrimination. To add to this, even when it comes to Airbnb's own guidelines on their website, she shouldn't have been banned, as what they describe as lesser crimes, which Hallam's case was, shouldn't get you banned. It's only for the more serious crimes such as terrorism, rape and murder that are grounds for permanent termination. And so this, even by Airbnb's own definition, was a mistake. The platform would later clear the air, stating that they understand that there are many reasons why someone might have a criminal record, and so they've actually developed an appeal system so that cases like Bethany Hallam's can be considered in the future. They concluded by saying that they've reinstated Mrs. Hallam and wished her well, but since this story dropped not only 6 months ago as of me recording this video, it seems as though that in the future there is a potential that if you've got a criminal record, no matter what the charge, you have to get your case appealed first before you can book an Airbnb. And that's potentially an unfair way of doing things to some and the right way of doing things to others. So what do you think? Let me know down in the comments as we move on to our fourth story of the day. And for this next story, I want to discuss someone who I've wanted to mention on this channel for a really long time now, and that is Daniel from Hiding in My Room. So I want to give a little background about Hiding in My Room just for the uninitiated, because he is a very interesting guy. He started his YouTube channel almost a decade ago now, and what separates him from the rest of the YouTube scene is his wild content. Just by looking at the titles of his videos, you'll see that something is up here. Like literally in the last month or two, he live streamed looking for a ladyboy in Thailand for 2.5 hours, he made a video about how to cheat on your girlfriend without being caught, and he made a video about him and his girlfriend being homeless. His content is a real rabbit hole and he's been covered by YouTubers before, but the biggest of these by far was made by Elvis the Alien about 4 years ago, so I'm thinking of potentially making a more up-to-date video about him soon enough, so do let me know if you're interested in that. But more relevant to our story, in September 2020, he uploaded a YouTube video titled "I Got Banned from Airbnb," fit with the classic YouTube sigh at the very start, where he explained that he didn't know exactly why he was banned from Airbnb, but he gave evidence to suggest that he's now been completely blacklisted from the platform. He knew that if he applied for a new account, he would have to give in his ID, which has likely been blacklisted, and he didn't know why because they never told him in the termination email. But after doing some digging in his comments, it seems as though the likelihood is that he got kicked out because he was filming OnlyFans videos in these Airbnbs. This is very likely the reason, as he does in fact have an OnlyFans, but I can't verify this claim because you would be more likely to see me drop my own OnlyFans than to see me pay £10 to extensively research his. Neither is happening. But a few weeks prior to his termination, Hiding in My Room uploaded a video titled "I Got Kicked Out of My Airbnb," where he discussed exactly that. He got a message from a homeowner known as Mark saying that Mark wasn't comfortable with Daniel shooting his OnlyFans content in Mark's Airbnb. I assume that one of Hiding in My Room's fans snitched on him or something, and it's very likely that he contacted Airbnb about it, leading to the termination. It seems as though Daniel didn't tell Mark that he was shooting his OnlyFans there. And no matter what you think of OnlyFans, whether you think it's an angelic gift or whether you think it's Satan's plague, I hope that we can both agree that not telling someone that you're shooting an OnlyFans video in their property is a bit grim. Airbnb does in fact have a policy in place for this, as they say that you should charge more for porn shoots if you allow them in the first place. And you're well within your rights to kick people out if they want to shoot adult content and you're either not okay with it or haven't been notified about it. So despite Daniel claiming that he didn't know why and making the point that he always left his rooms in good condition, Airbnb's policies sided against him here. And it's to my knowledge that this was the last video he ever made on the subject. I thought it would be good to ramp up to more serious cases, so things are only getting more extreme from here on out. I brought him up at the start of the video, but it's finally time to talk about the man known as the Wolf of Airbnb. Conrad Bircher was the real name of this man. He was 31 as of the time of this news story breaking, and his case is wild. So the deal here is that this man, who's given himself the title of the Wolf of Airbnb, was sued for $1.5 million after making a habit of renting out luxury apartments, throwing parties and organising photo shoots, and then not paying for the rent. It's to my understanding that his scheme went a little something like this. He would rent out a luxury apartment that's on the market and then sublet it by putting that property on Airbnb, charging insane amounts for people to use them for these photo shoots, film shoots, music videos or parties and whatnot, and then simply taking in all of the profit. But his behaviour was even more egregious than it might first seem, because despite the fact that he would do all of this and not pay any rent, even after his tenancy at these luxury apartments was over, he would still use them to rent out these Airbnbs. So you would assume that someone would eventually go to the authorities, right? But if you did, you would be wrong. Because apparently, he was working on this scheme for 3 years between February 2019 and April 2022, all the while disregarding rent payments that had been estimated to be worth $1 million. Despite the fact that all the while, he's thought to have made $1.1 million from income in renting out these Airbnbs. So if he wasn't paying for rent, where was he spending his money? It was on all of the bullshit, vain and superficial luxury items, of course. Private planes, designer clothing, big cars and all the rest, you've heard it before. It's thought that he broke New York City law by leasing a total of 18 properties for short-term rentals in the years that he ran this scheme, allegedly putting a price tag as high as $97 an hour for some of these places, despite the fact that it was illegal to offer comparable rent units for less than 30 days according to New York City law, which was something that he was doing. But he wouldn't just stop there, he took cheeky levels to places never before seen. During the pandemic, he made at least 4 applications through the Federal Payment Protection Program and fraudulently received $565,000. What? But if you've seen Martin Scorsese's 2013 masterpiece, The Wolf of Wall Street, you'll know that our protagonist here is about to go from rags to riches and then back to rags. Because it was time for this wolf to turn from an alpha to a beta. A doorman at one of the properties that he rented out on Airbnb caught a glimpse of a film crew going up to the apartment. The doorman would then notify the owner of the apartment, and from there, the scheme was over. He got the needle out to euthanize this wolf. Airbnb would collaborate with the FBI to investigate these happenings and immediately banned Bircher from their platform, with him shutting down his other social media accounts later and being indicted on the 27th of October 2022. As of recording this in January 2023, we don't know how much he'll have to pay back, if anything, and we don't know how long this wolf will be caged for, if at all. Conrad Bircher is in some seriously boiling hot water, there's no getting around that. But the same thing could be said for 6 people who were arrested in North Carolina after 4 holidaymakers were stabbed in what's been described as a drug-filled party. It was in the early hours of a Monday morning, not even a month ago as of recording this, on the 11th of January 2023, when the Madison County Sheriff's Department was alerted to criminal activity at a rental Airbnb home in Marshall, a small town, roughly 150 miles from the Tennessee border, home to a modest population of only 792 people. Law enforcement discovered a grisly sight when they arrived on the scene, laying eyes upon 4 holidaymakers that had been stabbed, as well as a plethora of drugs including cannabis, magic mushrooms and cocaine. Reports on the incident really don't go into too much detail over what led to this horrifying sequence of events, but they have confirmed that 6 people were arrested, those being Christopher Lynn Bowles, Daniel Mancella Pereira and Jody Michelle Duthit, as well as a husband-wife duo of Richard Vincent Sikowski and Cassie Dean Sikowski, who appear to be the parents of 3 children. Then there was also J. Caleb Bell, who seems to have been charged with the most serious of these crimes. He was charged with assault with a deadly weapon, inflicting serious injury with intent to kill. All of the suspects were also charged on drug possession of magic mushrooms and cocaine. But I think it's important to mention that just because all 6 of these people were arrested at the same time, that doesn't automatically mean that they were all arrested in connection to the stabbings, because they might have just been arrested in connection to the drugs. The police, however, did not mention in the arrest report whether drugs had any impact on the violence that occurred on that fateful Monday morning. They did confirm, however, that all of the victims, though hospitalized, were alive as of the media picking up the story. Airbnb would immediately ban the user who booked the property, though it's not said in the reports what his name was, nor if he was one of the people who were arrested. Airbnb also stated that they would be providing support for the host of the property, whose house had now become the scene of a crime. A disturbing tale from start to finish, just like our next case. When you think of a disgraceful Airbnb story, this next one has to be up there with the creepiest of them all. Brace yourselves if you want to hear it, because if you can't handle this source, you don't have to. This photograph of an Airbnb cabin might look innocuous enough, but it was actually managed by an Airbnb homeowner who allegedly took more than 2,000 photos and videos of people who were staying in his property without them knowing. The allegations are absolutely disgraceful for sure. Jay Ali is the man in question here. He was 54 years old as of the time that this news story broke and was a resident of Comfort, Texas, which is probably the wettest town name I've ever heard. But Ali was probably wetting himself when he realised that if he could rent out his cabin to residents, he could then spy on them in all sorts of compromising positions. And that is exactly what he allegedly did in this Airbnb nightmare story. Reports I found online say that these cameras had been set up for a total of 9 months prior to them being found, and they would also specify that he was eventually discovered by a male guest who might have been a bit paranoid. he had allegedly been looking up online how to spot hidden recording devices when he decided to look around the cabin. And that's when he found a secret camera in what was meant to look like a power adapter and Wi-Fi router. All the while, a female guest that he was with was in the shower. This camera was directed towards the bed, and with that said, I'm sure that you might be able to guess what the intentions behind that camera placement were. The police would be informed, and they would search his electronic devices, so phones, tablets, laptops and the sorts, and that's when they found roughly 2,100 photographs and videos of people fully nude, partially nude, and having sex. Bianca Zuniga Goldwater, representing 17 of the people who stayed at Ali's Airbnb, said that the situation was like a real-life scary movie. Ali would face 15 lawsuits that accuse him of emotional distress and intentionally invading privacy. But as far as I know, there hasn't actually been a verdict yet. If there has been one, I couldn't find it on the internet. Even if I'm sure that somewhere in those 2,000 photographs and videos, there must be a tiny little Scooby clue of evidence. Even still, you guys know the drill by now, it would be absolutely bonkers if Airbnb did not take Ali off of their platform because of this. Obviously, it goes without saying that spying on naked guests for 9 months will get you taken off Airbnb. Definitely one of the most scary stories we've had today, either that or the stabbings for sure, but let me know what do you think down in the comments. And if you're down there, why not give this video a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, because that's all we have time for today. I also have a Twitter and an Instagram linked in the description if you want to follow me there. If you like this video, maybe you'll like some others in the book of the band, so I'll put a playlist up here so you can go watch them if you want to. Apart from that, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.